Hi. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back. I hope everybody had a great Chag. I did throw a little teaser in there that this is going to be something very, very different. Trust me, this is very, very different. I'm going to just start with. We don't need so much of a chumash. I have the source sheets that I sent you, and I'll put it on the screen in a minute. But it's not often that we get to read Acharei-Mot solo. So we read Acharei-Mot next week, Kedoshim, which parenthetically, and that will be the Shiur this coming Shabbos morning at 8:30, if anybody really wants to be here. But it's a really interesting question. And that is that if you have, let's say, people in Israel. So my daughter, I took her to the airport yesterday. She went back to Israel for the remaining 2 hours of seminary that she has until June. And this coming Shabbos, we're going to read Parshas Acharei-Mot. In Israel, because the last day of Yontif was Friday, so Shabbos was a regular Shabbos, albeit with not so much to eat. They brag, oh, we were able to eat hummus. Okay. They didn't have real chametz. But Shabbos was a regular Shabbos, so they read Acharei-Mot in Israel, and this coming Shabbos in Israel, they're going to read Kedoshim. Now, the logical move, one would think, would be that we should just read Acharei-Mot and Kedoshim together this week, and then we'll be caught up. But that's not what happens. We don't catch up until before Shavuos. No, I'm sorry. It's not before Shavuos. I'm sorry. Matos Maseh, like before Tisha B'Av. So it's 3 full months that if you're going to go to Israel, you're going to miss a parsha. Unless you come back and you make it up and you hear it again. But it's a weird thing that the way that works out, again, because of how Yontif fell out, and because our second day of Yontif is Shabbos, so we didn't read the parsha. It always throws people off. And they go, oh, what do we read this week's parsha? No, it's a special Yontif reading because it falls on Shabbos. So Yontif takes over. So that's one thing. That's this coming Shabbos morning. So therefore, it's not often that we get Acharei-Mot solo. Acharei-Mot, because whenever we have Acharei-Mot Kedoshim together, the Shiur is always going to be on Kedoshim, because Kedoshim has far greater interest. Chapter 19 has all the great interpersonal laws, and you have to love your neighbor, and don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person, the whole bit. Fine. But Acharei-Mot is Yom Kippur. Yeah, the Yom Kippur Avodah. This is actually what we read on Yom Kippur. So I'm giving you just a brief outline of what's mentioned in the Psukim at the beginning. By Daber Hashem Moshe Acharei Moshe ben Aaron So Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's 2 sons when they approached and they died. It's not on the sheet. I'm just reading out of the Chumash. Also the episode of the death of the sons of Aaron was in Parsha Shemini. So then we had Shemini, we had Tazria, Mitzora, and then Acharei-Mot. So there's this interlude of Tazria, Mitzora also in between, and the rest of Shemini, which is the laws of the kosher animals, are all in between the episode. And here we go. We're going back that Acharei-Mot after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron. So he says to Aaron, Hashem says to Moshe, speak to Aaron Achicha, Va'al yavo b'chol eis ha'lakodesh mibeis la'paroches el pnei ha'kaporos asher l'ron v'lo yamos ki ve'anen eirei ala kaporos. He says, you cannot come anytime into the sanctuary within the Parochet. So the Parochet, as we know, when we say the sanctuary, let's say there was something called the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was separated by a Parochet, and all the items that we have in a traditional synagogue are meant to mirror what took place in the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan. So on our ark, between us and the ark, the holiest part of the shul ostensibly is the ark in which the Torah is kept. So in between us and the ark is what? Is a parochas. There is a curtain. Okay, so they had this curtain, and it was only, you couldn't go in. He says, because in a cloud I will appear upon the ark cover. Okay, because if you would go in when not summoned, then you could die, which is the Kohen Gadol would only go in 1 day a year, which was, of course, Yom Kippur. And they had the Gemara and Yuma discusses at length the process by which Kohen Gadol would go in, and they would tie a rope around his ankle. Then in case he would drop dead, they would have to pull him out because they couldn't go in and get him. And they have how do they clean it? How do they service it? And all these different types of things. And then it goes into, and this is how he's going to go in. He's going to have all these types of offerings, and he's going to, anyway. So then this is the process by which the Yom Kippur Avoda was performed. So it's time to Yom Kippur. Okay, well, we just finished Pesach. It's almost Shavuos. The summer's basically over, so it's Yom Kippur soon. We have to start repenting now. But the way in which the service was performed, this is the most important part of the Yom Kippur service, was this parsha, these psukim at the beginning, okay? And then it talks about the two goats, and one goat said, one tag said La Hashem, one said La Azazel. Azazel was this God-forsaken place, and they would take this animal and they would throw it off the mountain, much to the dismay of the people over at Peta, and they would break its neck and all the types of things, and that would be the thing around his neck from red would turn white, and they would know they were forgiven. In modern day Hebrew, just to show you the purity of the Hebrew language, in modern day Hebrew, when you tell somebody, or if you watch in the movies, when you say somebody like go to hell or go somewhere, it's Lech LaAzazel is the term in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, but Azazel is a biblical term of this place where they would send that animal. Okay, so that's just the background of this in the parsha, where Aaron had to go, Aaron or whoever would be the Kohen Gadol at the time would have to then go and perform the service, and he would have to go into the Kodesh Kodashim. But what separated him from the Kodesh Kodashim is, of course, the Paroches. So now the Gemara. Look at the Gemara. So I'm gonna put this on the screen now. We're gonna go like all Indiana Jones today. Okay, you guys remember Indiana Jones? Oh, good. Okay, you see that? I'm on the first page here. It's this one. Right. Okay, you got it there. And right by this is a Gemara in Yuma. And the Gemara in Yuma, I'll try to blow this up a little bit for you. Not that much. Okay. So this is the Gemara on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph here, and it says like this. Just move everything on top there. Okay. Tana. Keshehu mazeh eina mazeh ala parochas ela keneged haparochas. So one of the services on Yom Kippur on the Beis Hamikdash is, you remember what, if everybody stays in Yom Kippur davening that long, then when they start going achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'shalosh, they have this series of counting and sprinklings. So they would sprinkle blood, and the pasuk says here. Hold on. It says he would take from the blood of the animal, and he would sprinkle his forefinger upon the eastern front of the ark cover, and in front of the ark cover. And here it says, by the way, and it's also very confusing because the word in the Chumash is kapores, is the cover of the ark, but paroches is the curtain. It's not by accident that they have the same letters. There's definitely an interrelationship there, but then that's not part of the conversation. Now he goes out to the altar. He takes some blood of the bull, some blood of the he-goat. He puts on the horn of the altar. He'll sprinkle upon it from the blood with the forefinger 7 times, and he will then cleanse it from the sins of Bnei Israel. So part of the cleansing is shechting, dipping, mixing blood, and sprinkling blood. So there was this notion of sprinkling the blood also on the parochas, which is an important thing. So the Gemara says that when they would, mazeh means to sprinkle, eino mazeh ala parochas ela keneged haparochas. He would not sprinkle directly on the curtain, but rather near the curtain, in the vicinity of the curtain, in the proximity of the curtain, but not on the actual curtain. I mean, you can imagine that you had this curtain, like putting blood on it. It's kind of gross, right? I mean, the whole thing is gross. I mean, I mean, if you're not a blood person like me, I'm not, I'm getting much better. It used to be that, like, when they would have a bris in shul, like the second the guy walks in the back of the room with his bag, I would pass out. Like, seriously, I don't know. Like, it's just not, not for me. But I've gotten better. Now I can sort of like do my breathing exercises. It's all good. That's why God blessed me with a lot of daughters. So, but look at this next line. And this is where we're going to take off. Omar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, Ani re'isiha beromi, v'hayu aleha kama tipe damim shel par v'sa'ir shel yom ha'kippurim. Woo! So Rabbi Elazar says, I was in Rome This is straight in the Gemara. I was in Rome. I saw in Rome. I went to Rome. I said, give me the keys to the basement. Right? Come on. Who hasn't had that desire to like go to the Vatican and say, can I just have the keys for like a few minutes? I want to just check out what you have in the basement. Okay. If anybody here reads the Jerusalem Report, there's a magazine from the Jerusalem Post called the Jerusalem Report. I subscribed to it once, I don't know, 15 years ago. And no matter how hard I try, I have new credit cards. I keep moving. They keep finding me and they keep resubscribing me. I think it's run by the Mossad or something because they figure out my new credit card information and they manage to charge it. But it happens to be a really, really good magazine. It's a bi-weekly magazine, but you get it like once every 3 months and then you get like 4 in a row. You know, it's a typical Israeli thing, but they have really good interest articles about Israel and it's all over the spectrum, politically, religiously, whatever. And a few weeks ago on the cover, they had someone who had a very in-depth article about how he's convinced that the kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, the artifacts from the Beis HaMikdash, which were looted by the Romans in the destruction of the Second Temple, are indeed in the Vatican. And he has a whole historical accounts of people who have gone there and seen it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
He came to Archel and spoke.
that guy?
Yes.
All right. There's a guy, everybody has like their one obsession, like, so.
An older guy.
I don't know. I saw the article, but we've always had this notion that the menorah is there, and wouldn't that be just cool? I mean, like if they have it, just give it back. And there's a whole, and it's very politically fraught with the giving it back or not giving it back. There's all kinds of ramifications. Okay, but here, this is the Gemara. So the Gemara, which is redacted in the around the year between 500-600, something like that. So you're talking about the destruction in the year 70, and this is a few hundred years later. And Rabbi Lazar Bar Yossi says, I was in Rome and I saw the parochas with the blood sprinkled on it. So in other words, there's a position in the Gemara that they didn't sprinkle it on there, and he gives anecdotal evidence to the contrary, saying, no, I saw it. We're going to have a few questions on this, but the fact that the Gemara alone makes this statement is pretty cool. So I want to show you now a Rashi on the bottom. If you see where there's an arrow, I'm going to just move it over in here. Okay, there's my arrow. See my prehistoric primitive arrow there. You could see that if anybody here is a teacher, you would be able to diagnose the fact that I can't even draw an arrow straight. Today, for sure, I would be in like one of those, you need tactile therapy or something. I have the worst handwriting. So Maseches Me'ilah, and we're going to look at this Gemara in a second. The Maseches Me'ilah, Gabe ben Talmion, Nasenes, Rabbi Lezer ben Rabbi Yossi. Sheripa is Bas HaMelech, Romi. He says the Gemara relates that there was this person named Ben Talmion, and there was a miracle that occurred to this Rabbi Lezer ben Yossi in our Gemara. Sheripe es Bas Melech Romi, the king of Rome, his daughter was ill, and he healed her. Shenichnas shed begufa. Because what happened? A shade, an evil spirit, went into her body. Ooh, I wish I had like proper background music. Okay, this is if you think that's so crazy, so far-fetched, the Gemara has like 800 million references to shadim, to demons, spirits, things like that. That's a whole other thing if you want to discuss another time. We'd have to like dim the lights and light candles and stuff like that. And the Gemara Psachim has 2-3 blocks dedicated to just how to get rid of certain types of evil spirits and demons called shadim. And there was this shade that took over, and he knew how to do it. He knew how to take care of it. Okay. And Sheshmo ben Talmion, and that was the name of the shade was Ben Talmion. So this Talmion, they have a name for the shade. All the shadim have names. It says v'hichnisuhu la'otzer hamelach litol kol ma sheyirtzeh. And as a reward, as payment for healing the daughter and ridding her of this, what's the word they use today? There's those movies when you got possessed by something. What was it called? Trying to channel my inner like 70s child. What were those movies called when like the spirit exorcism, but like there was, I don't know, something like that. They would exercise. So he exorcised the shade, okay, from her, and he was rewarded. So the king said, you can go down to the Otsar Hamelach, to the king's warehouse, and take whatever you want. And all he wanted to take were the letters that had the decrees that the Roman kings and the Roman leadership decreed against Israel, umatza'am v'kara'am, and he found them and he tore them up as if to tear up the evil decree against Israel. V'sham ra'ah klei beis hamikdash ba'otzar, and there he saw the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash in the warehouse. So Rashi, quoting from the Gemara, we're going to see that Gemara in a second. And here there's another arrow here, just on the side. Again, I know it's really small. This is the Gilian Hashas. The Gilian Hashas is a super commentary on Rashi in the Gemara. It's found on the text of the Gemara page. It's from Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger, quite much in the period of the Acharonim, and he always will have these little notes here. And he says, Anira Sibaromi, he says, Visham Ra'a Kle Beis HaMikdash, and he quotes here, he says, Ba'avos de Rabbi Nassan, that's what it stands for, and it's hard to read the print. Perak Mem Aleph, Machtesha Shel Beis Avtinas Shelchan Umenora Uparochas V'tzitz Adayin Munachan Beromi. And he says, from there, that source of Avos de Rabbi Nassan, we see that he says certain types of the grinder that was used, the Shulchan, the menorah, and hold on, somebody's coming in, and the Paroches and the tzitz, which was the forehead plate that said Kodesh La Hashem. He says Adayin Munachin Beromi, are still in Rome. Right? That's like a wild, pretty wild story. Okay, so I think we've lived up to the hype thus far, even if we did nothing else. But let us continue. Let's look at that Gemara in Me'ilah. I have it here, but I have it's a lousy translation I can get on one page. So I'll read it from the Art Scroll, and I will here. So this is the Gemara Me'ilah in 17b, and the Gemara says that they went and they're talking about different decrees, and they said, who's going to go and annul the decrees? They say, let Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai go. Okay, that's where it picks up. You see the place where it says on the second page where it says Me'ilah 17b. They said, let Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai go, because he's accustomed to having miracles performed on his behalf. And after him, who shall go? They said, Rabbi Lozer Bar Yossi. Here's who we're talking about. I have something in the chat here. Okay. Rabbi Yossi said to them, and were my father Chalafta alive, it would be Yossi bar Chalafta, could you say to him, give your son for execution? Rabbi Shimon said to them, and were my father Yochai alive, could you say to him, give your son for execution? Rabbi Yossi said to them, I will go instead. For it is perhaps Rabbi Shimon will cause punishment to befall my son that I fear. Okay. Rabbi Shimon accepted upon himself that he will not cause punishment to befall Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi then allowed his son to go with him. So this is like typical Gemara telling a story. They can't just tell a story. They have to have all the back and forth and the conversation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even so, he caused them punishment. For as they were going on the road, the question was inquired of them, from where do we derive that the blood of a sheretz is tameh, of a creepy crawly thing? Rabbi Elazar ben Yossi, he curled his mouth and he said, because the pasuk says, and this shall be for you tameh, lachem ha-tameh. Rabbi Shimon said to him, from the curling of your lips, you are discerned to be a Torah scholar, for your answer attests to your wisdom. However, you acted improperly, and therefore let the son not return to his father. The demon Ben Tamalion came out to greet him. Here's our demon friend, Ben Tamalion. Okay, and the Art Scroll notes that on account of this curse, when they were later traveling on the ship to Rome, Rabbi Elazar contacted askara, a fatal disease in which the throat gets blocked until it's impossible to breathe, some sort of asphyxiation or croup. Rabbi Shimon then reminded himself of the promise of Yossi not to harm his son, and he prayed for recovery. But he was lying sick on the floor of the boat. The sailor stepped on his throat and dislodged the blockage from his throat, and Rabbi Elazar recovered. Okay. Anyway, here's our demon, Tamalion, Ben Tamalion. And he said, is it your will that I come with you to help annul the decree? Rabbi Shimon cried, for God sent the demon to help him in his mission rather than an angel. And he said, even for the maidservant of my father's house, an angel appeared 3 times, referring to Hagar, when Hagar an angel came, so spoke to her several times. And I didn't merit an angel even 1 time. However, let the miracle come in whatever manner. So Ben Tamalion went ahead and he entered into the body of the daughter of the Caesar. When Rabbi Shimon arrived there, he was brought to the daughter and he said, Ben Tamalion, go out. Ben Tamalion, go out. They did it quietly, the note says. And as soon as they called him, he departed the body and went away. In gratitude, it's the family of the Caesar, they said to Rabbi Shimon and Elazar ben Yossi, Ask for whatever there is for you to ask, and it will be granted. They brought him into the Caesar's treasury to take whatever they wanted. And they found the document with the decree, and they took it and they tore it up. So that's the decree that was mentioned, that Rashi mentioned, the decree of the Romans against the Jewish people. And it's in reference to this incident that Rabbi Elazar ben Yossi said in the Brisa, in support of his position that the blood of the Inchatos must actually reach the Parochas. Again, that's our Gemara, where he says that the blood actually goes on the curtain. And he says, I saw the Parochas in the city of Rome, and there were upon it several drops of blood from the Inchatos offerings that were sprinkled on it. And this proves that the blood of those offerings were sprinkled onto the Parochas. Okay, so a long-winded story, but a weird story nonetheless, that that the Parochet indeed had blood sprinkled on it. Now, next, we have another story. This is a question that some of the Acharei-Mot of Meir Shapiro of Lublin, the founder of the Daf Hayomi, as you may know, and he has a question on the Gemara based on the Gemara in Gittin. So look at the Gemara in Gittin. This is the Gemara in Gittin next, okay? And this is what's known as the Tisha B'Av Gemara. Why is it known as the Tisha B'Av Gemara? Because on Tisha B'Av, one is not allowed to study regular forms of Torah because Torah brings you such joy. Obviously, everybody knows Tuesdays at 10:30 is like the happiest time of my whole week for all of you because we're learning Torah, obviously. So we can't do this on Tisha B'Av. So we're only allowed to learn things that pertain to the story of Tisha B'Av, the laws of Tisha B'Av, or the laws of mourning, things like that. So this tells one of the great stories of Tisha B'Av. And, like we feel like we should have popcorn because this is a really, really wild, great story. So Vespasian, who sends Titus, who said, where is their God and the rock in whom they trusted? This was the wicked Titus who blasphemed and insulted heaven. By the way, one of the kinos on Tisha B'Av, Zachar Masha Sartzar B'Finim, is based on this Gemara about how Titus went a little bit overboard. And of course, if you've been to Rome, you've seen the Arch of Titus, and where it says on it, Judea Capta, the whole bit. But this is based all on this story. So what did he do? So he took a harlot by the hand and he entered the Holy of Holies. He spread out a scroll of the law and committed a sin on it. You could use your imagination. Okay, so this is how he comes, and he's sent as the agent, as a general, to destroy Jerusalem, destroy the temple. He destroys the temple with basically no pushback whatsoever, no resistance. And he's like, where's your God? How great is your God? So he took a sword and he slashed the curtain, meaning the Parochas, because he's in the Holy of Holies where he does this terrible, terrible sin. And it's just a horrible thing, even to imagine it. And then on his way out, the curtains are hanging. He takes a sword and he starts slashing the curtains. And miraculously, blood spurts out. And he thought that he had slain himself, or really, meaning he thought that he had really, ultimately, that he killed God. As it says, their adversaries have roared in the midst of the assembly, and they have set up ensigns for signs. Abba Chanan said, who is a mighty one like unto thee? Who is like thee, mighty in self-restraint? All right, etc. And thou didst hear the blaspheming and insults of the wicked man and keep silent. In the school of Rabbi Shmuel was taught, who is like thee among the gods? Who is like thee among the dumb ones? Ilemim, that's a play on the words. So Titus further took the curtain and shaped it like a basket and brought all the vessels of the sanctuary and put them in it. He put them on board a ship to go and triumph for them in the city. So we have the Gemara says quite clearly that he looted the Beis HaMikdash. He took the Parochas and used it as a satchel of some sort, and that's how he took the Kalim to Rome. Now, it also says that he was so haughty and he was so arrogant that he thought that he killed God. He stabs the Parochas, and the fact that blood comes out, okay, so this is going to be part of our conversation, okay? And the pasuk says, and behold, I saw the wicked buried, and they came to the grave that they had done right away. Don't read Kvurim Kavutzim. Some say, and the Gemara goes on and on and on and on. This is very sort of dramatic type of Gemara. And the rest of the Gemara, though, and it tells also that he took so many slaves. They took captives back to Rome. Here it tells the great story that how does God get back at Titus, even though that ultimately was an agent of God because God sent someone to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, but he went a little overboard. So what did he do? So when Paro came, he drowned him in water. When Sisera came, he drowned him in water. So if he's really mighty, let him come on the dry land and fight with me. He says, who's God? God's going to get back at me? So a voice went forth from heaven saying, sinner, the son of the sinner, descendant of Esau the sinner, I have a tiny creature in my world called a gnat. Why is it called tiny creature? Because it has an orifice for taking in, but not for excreting. Go up on the dry land and make war with it. So when he landed, a gnat came and entered his nose, and it knocked against his brain for 7 years. That's a heck of a headache. One day, as he was passing a blacksmith, it heard the noise of the hammer and stopped. So Titus says, I see there is a remedy. So every day they brought a blacksmith who hammered before him. If he was a non-Jew, they gave him 4 zuz. If he was a Jew, they said, it's enough that you see the suffering of your enemy. This went on for 30 days, but then the creature got used to it. It's been taught, Pinchas ben Aruva said, I was in the company with the notables of Rome, and when Titus died, they split open his skull and found there's something like a sparrow, 2 stelas in weight. A Tana taught like a young dove, 2 pounds in weight. Abaye said we had on record that its beak was of brass and its claws of iron. But when he died, he said, burn me and scatter my ashes over the 7 seas so that the God of the Jews should not find me and bring me to trial. So anyway, there's a nice fun ending to the story where God says, okay, you think you can kill God? I'm going to take my smallest creature and that's going to do you in. And he dies a long, slow, painful, excruciating, noisy death of having this thing eat away at his brain. Okay. And there's a group that we should never, ever quote in shul. But there's a lyric from such a group who are so anti-Israel that they're disgusting. And the phrase goes, and the worms ate into his brain. Anyway, so I'll let you figure out where that song's from. Okay. So this is the Gemara. So the question on the Gemara is this. Rabbi Elazar sees a paroches with blood on it. Okay. How does that prove that the blood was from the offerings? Okay. Not only that, the Gemara in Tamid, which I didn't print for you, but I'll take my word for it. The Gemara, and the Gemara discusses all the sort of dimensions and all the workings of the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara there says that they would always make 2 parochot. Parochot, it should be, right? Yeah, I don't know. Figure out what the plural of parochet. Parochiot. I don't know. Pargiot. Now I'm getting hungry. So they would always have a backup if one of them would get dirty, right? So how does he know that the one that he saw was the one that was used on Yom Kippur? Maybe it was one that just got dirty, or maybe through all his bloodshed and everything. How does it necessarily prove? Okay, maybe that's just what Titus brought back, and because he was, constantly killing people and this and that. So how does it necessarily prove? And it's very unusual for the Gemara to, when we have a machlokas in halacha, to always say, well, there really is a machlokas in what's called mitzius. In other words, that, oh wait, I actually saw it, and this is what happened, right? So we don't usually use those as proof necessarily, or as my Rebbe always would say to us, don't judge Judaism by Jews. Okay, that's always a very, very good saying. So how do we know that that's exactly what took place? And how could he have known that it was the blood of Yom Kippur? And furthermore, if the blood was on there, okay, let's just figure this out. If Titus comes and we know what day that he destroyed the Beis Hamikdash was Tisha B'Av, and Yom Kippur is when? On Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av is a long way after Yom Kippur. How does blood come out of the parochas? Even if it was done 5 minutes ago, a lot of it wouldn't necessarily. So in other words, some sort of miracle, and that's what the Gemara says, a miracle happened, right? If you look back in the text, miraculously blood spurted out. So why would God perform a miracle for Titus and let him think that he killed God? Okay, so there's an interesting question based on a story that's related in the Gemara to try and answer a halachic query about whether or not they sprinkle blood on the paroches or not. Okay, so and here we come into a whole other thing, and this is a monumental piece in the Meshech Chochmah from Rameir Simcha of Devinsk, and the answer that is given to this question from Rameir Shapira is that indeed they would sprinkle the blood on Yom Kippur on the paroches, no question. But the blood was absorbed, and the blood then becomes part of the sanctity of the paroches, and therefore it would now be subsumed under the sanctity. And because of the holiness and this is the holiest place on earth, on God's earth, is the Kodesh Kodashim, it wouldn't be nice to have an unkempt parochas. Now they had the backup, but they actually never used it, and they would make sure that it would always look dignified, but they never had to use the backup. Now, however, once the Beis Hamikdash is defiled, then the parochas actually loses its sanctity, and you're going to prove this from another episode, and that's why, since it no longer had its sanctity, that means the blood that was absorbed therein no longer had its sanctity or the ability to remain in there in its sanctified state. And therefore, God makes this miracle that it sort of flows out. Now, Titus doesn't know this because he didn't go to yeshiva, and he thinks that he killed God. And therefore, the whole story happens. But Rabbi Lazar ben Yosef, when he sees the blood on it, he says, oh, no, that's not new blood. It must be that when Titus came and the blood came out, that's because it was originally in there. And only why does it come out? Because it lost its kedusha. Now, what does that mean that the blood lost its kedusha? What does it mean that the parochas lost its kedusha? And this, to answer this question, is the answer to another burning question which we have, which we actually did read it over a little bit over on Acharei-Mot on Sukkot, on what was the one we just had? Pesach. We just had Acharei-Mot Pesach on one of the Torah readings. And in Parshas Kisisa, of course, and this is one of those great questions, which we've touched on it before, is that Moshe Rabbeinu, and oh, by the way, so one of the great Acharei-Mot activities, there'll be a good Acharei-Mot activities. I still have like ranges of people to entertain, from my mother, God bless her, in her 80s, and my son who's 6. But for $4.99, Taka Mitzia on iTunes, I was able to purchase the 10 Commandments. Whereas until now, I had it on 2 VHS tapes, which take a year and a yovel to rewind and to watch. It's like 4 hours long. My kids are like, "Are you joking?" Like, we watched it. My mom watched start to finish, and it was great because some of the graphics, the imagery. All right, the history is wrong, but it's fun. What? I have one somewhere probably, but I had one. I got, like, when I was first married, like I bought one, like I got the tapes, like it was such a part of my childhood, like, and then, that's how my daughter has her name, right? So Yoshi, her name is Yocheved, and in the movie they called her Joshabel, and because of that, we made fun of it. So that's how the name Yoshi just stuck. And to this day, she's Yoshi, that's nothing else. So the end of the movie, they have Moshe, he smashes the tablets. So we know the story. They finally get out of Egypt. They get through Mara. They get through Amalek. They get to Mount Sinai. Moshe says, you want it? Nasa v'nishma. Great. That's chapter 24 in Mishpatim. And then he's like, okay, now I got to go get it. So he's up on the mountain 40 days, 40 nights, and Satan comes and he confuses them and they panic and they get Aaron, and they make a golden calf. Moshe, in the meantime, comes down when he's supposed to come down, except that they don't realize that that's when he's supposed to come down. He's holding the tablets in his hand. And what does he do with the tablets? He smashes them and to destroy the egel, or he throws them on the ground. It says, Vayashlich. Moshe casts the tablets down on the ground. So the Meshech Chochmah asks a very, very simple question. We know, and it says very clearly that it was V'hamichtav, Michtav Elokos, it was Etzba Elokim, that these were handwritten by God. Okay, so could you imagine that if, like, you spent a few days up with God and God made you like a little memento, and he gave you a little keepsake from your visit up 40 days in the mountain with him, and he's like, hey, I want you to have this, and these are the law. This is the law of Moses, and he comes down. This is the holiest thing known to mankind, because it came directly from God. He brought it himself, not through a messenger, not through a shliach, not through FedEx. He brings them down himself, and he sees what's going on. So I would think, because he has Yehoshua next to him, Yeshua, do me a favor, hold this for a second, and then I'm going to go yell to people, or let me place these down gently, and then I'll go and take care of it. But instead, he takes the holiest physical item known to mankind heretofore, and he smashes it on the ground. How is he allowed to do that? It's a good question, right? Vivian, is that a good question? Okay, good. I'm glad. I just want to make sure you're with me. So the Meshech Chochmah's answer is that items themselves are not necessarily inherently holy. There's no intrinsic kedusha, intrinsic sanctity to items, unless they are being used for the right purpose. So long as the Jewish people were worshiping the golden calf, then he was just holding two stones, rocks. They had no intrinsic sanctified value whatsoever. So look at what he says here. He says, "Valzet sabach Moshe kekruchi." It's the Meshech Chochmah. It's the last page. It's the you have it. It's the column, the bottom right column. Okay, I'm starting from the beginning of that column, that paragraph. Aim tedamu ki ani inyan be'ezer kedusha bilti mitzvahs Hashem ad ki behedek vadi asisim lechem egel. He says, do you think that if you're worshiping a calf, that there's any sanctity? Chalila gam ani ish kemochem. He says, I am human. The Torah does not depend on me. He says, because the 38 years subsequently, when they ended up in wandering in the desert, Hashem didn't speak directly to Moshe. He says, don't say that the mikdash or the sanctuary or the tabernacle, the Mishkan, are kiddushim me'atzmam, are sanctified on their own. Chalila, God forbid. Hashem yisparach shoreh b'toch banav. God dwells among you. V'im hema kadam avru bris. But if they are people who have violated a covenant, husar mehem kol kedusha, then all sanctity has been removed. And he says, and they are just nothing more than any mundane item. There is no sanctity whatsoever. He says, and look at the proof that he brings. And this is what's great, because the Meshech Chochmah, when he's talking about the luchos, look at the proof that he brings. V'titus nichnas l'kodesh hakadashim v'zon imo v'loni zok. He says, he quotes our Gemara in Gittin, that Titus, the wicked, he comes in with a harlot to the Holy of Holies. And what happens to him? Nothing. He has no punishment. God doesn't strike him dead on the spot. Why? Ki husar kedusha so, because the sanctity was removed. And if the sanctity was removed, and Yosef Remizet, he says, then he goes on to talk about the luchos. So if that's the case, then what's happening in our Gemara, for our point of view, is that when Titus comes and he's defiled the Beis Hamikdash, and the people, for whatever reason, they deserve that destruction. And once it's in that destructive state, there's no longer any sanctity. If there's no longer any sanctity, then there's no miracle needed to hold the blood inside of the parochas. If there's no need to hold the blood of the parochas, that's why there's blood all over the parochas. And that's how, when he schleps it back to Rome, then Rabbi Yossi, when he goes to Rome and he sees it there, he knows, oh, that's how I know that they used to sprinkle it. It stayed there in a miraculous fashion, but once the miracle was removed, because the sanctity was removed, he goes, that's how I was able to prove it. So it's kind of a wild roundabout story. But if you've ever hear people talk about, oh, the Kalim and the Beis Hamikdash and Rome, et cetera, it's not a myth. The Gemara itself, and we see in 2-3 different locations where the Gemara itself discusses the fact that Kalim were looted from Jerusalem, taken to Rome, and the rabbis themselves said, I saw it there. And interestingly enough, that's a whole other conversation, is that when he had the opportunity to take whatever he wanted, why he didn't want to take the Kalim. Instead, he took the decree that the Romans had written. Maybe they felt that was stronger. But he gives it's a wild piece of Gemara where he gives this sort of, bird's eye view of, oh yeah, I was there, I saw it. And this is what it looked like, and there was blood, and that's how I could use it to prove. So we have a few different instances in the Gemara where that's also like, where's the Beis Hamikdash hidden? Where's the Ark hidden? That's if you really want to go Indiana Jones, where the Ark is hidden. The Gemara also discusses in Yuma and other places where one Kohen discovered one of the the floor panels was loose, and he started playing around with it. And he realized that it must be that's where the Beis Hamikdash is, because the guy started touching it and he dropped dead. And that's how he realized where the Aron was. So they said, oh yeah, don't go near there, because they knew that after the destruction, that they buried the Aron somewhere under Jerusalem. Now it was taken elsewhere. I don't know. You can watch the movie and figure out what's what. But here in Acharei-Mot, this simple parsha, which talks about the avoda and the Beis Hamikdash and the sprinkling of the blood on the curtain, there's a lot more to it, as we see here. So it's a good way to get us back into like our spring season, a little bit of, intrigue, a little bit of history and a little bit of halacha. All these things are intertwined as we try to get ready for Chag HaShavuos, because we have to give the Torah. We have to know what happens to stuff afterwards. So it's all part of one thing. Anyway, it's great to see everybody back, and I hope everybody's feeling well. And everybody should just please, if you see Chedva, just tell her, remind her like who we are. She may have forgotten us. I don't know. I'm still waiting for the doctor's note. It's all good. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.